So that leads us nicely into the next section, which is going to be a conversation among the four of you about. Uh, I mean, we've talked a little bit of some about some of the current realities, but moving into creative and potentially radical solutions for finding our way to the next stage of the experience, and eventually when the pandemic ends. And Charlene, Greensboro Opera, you are on the board, and that's in Greensboro, North Carolina, and located in Guilford County. And it's a small regional company. And I know it's committed to presenting really wonderful staged opera productions, but also to arts education and civic engagement in the area. And you're on the board, and I gather you're on the new ad hoc committee, the Task Force on Social Justice, formed to address social justice issues and equity and diversity. Could you tell us a story or two about what's happened with that company in the last 9 months? And as you all, the rest of you hear things, please chime in and share synergies and different thoughts.
Yes, the pandemic, and to be hit both with the pandemic and the social injustice issues with the murders of, as you said, George Floyd and other Black people. We felt we were in the unique position that were about to present the opera Porgy and Bess in November of last year. Um, we knew that we would be presenting an opera that many people in the local community would find outdated and guilty of perpetuating negative stereotypes. So we had two tasks. One was we wanted to write a pledge, which we did, which the task force was asked to present to the board, committing Greensboro Opera to social equity, which was approved and adopted in August last year, and which we committed to a certain percentage to try and represent the community in the board, as members of the board, in productions and in the orchestra. Let's see what else. So we are also educating ourselves to deal with the pushback that we know we may have, because we feel that Porgy and Bess is too beautiful an opera to be consigned to not be heard. The pandemic also affected us in our publicity, fundraising, which all became virtual, as you might know, might think. We worked very hard to have our soloists who were doing performances to be paid the same stipends that they were going to receive, even though their productions were virtual that we had. In fact, one young singer who had car trouble, the opera company paid for him to fly to participate in the production. The main thing, another thing I want to say, I don't know if this is the main thing, but we have a unique program, I'll say this very quickly, for the schools here in the Guilford County, which is made up of 9 municipalities, which include Greensboro, High Point, Jamestown, various other places. And it's called the Barbara Ann Peters Write Your Own Opera. And it is when 4th graders in the public school system submit through their schools stories that they want to have set to opera. It is the one that is chosen is edited by Greensboro Opera's artistic director. It's set to music by a local composer and then sung by University of Greensboro voice students. And then the following year at the Carolina Theater here in Greensboro, all the 5th grade classes in the public schools come in, about 6,000 students who come in to see 2 performances over 3 days of this little opera. And it's often a first introduction for students, for public school students. And the ethnic makeup of the public schools is Black or African Americans, about 41%, and white students are about 29%. So we feel we're doing a great service to introduce this art form creating future audiences and possibly future performers for this art form.
So I'm interested in in addition to this, thinking about when the pandemic begins to let go of its clutches and we are beginning to be able to be back in together, what's going to happen to our uh, performances, to venues? Peter, did you have something? You look like you're going to say
I,
something.
that's me thinking. Um, well, I mean, I can tell you what's happening now, which is that some of you may have seen in Barcelona, the Liceu, or maybe it was Madrid in the Teatro Real, they opened and they had trees in the seats in the orchestra, which looked very gorgeous, but it was a little bit peculiar because, of course, there were not allowed to be people there. At the same time, the Salzburg Festival opened last August, and they opened with a reduced audience, but with an audience. And they did a new production of Strauss's Elektra in the big Festspielhaus. And the singers theoretically potted, although they didn't, because I knew the woman who was singing Elektra. She said, we just stayed on our own. But, you know, everybody has to get to work. And we weren't isolating on our way to work. And then people had spouses and children come, and the spouses and the children weren't isolating, but miraculously no one got sick. So that's terrific, and gives some cause for hope. But of course, now Austria is shutting down again. So I think it will go in two ways. One will be, and I know that this production of Bohème that I'm supposed to do, both in Seattle and Washington, they've both said, we want this to be the real Bohème. We want this to be big and lavish and everybody on stage. There are 200 people on stage in Act Two. And we want everybody to be in the audience. And I'm like, okay, maybe 2026. I mean, I don't know when that's going to happen. You know, there'll be this old man directing. But I think more rationally, I will say, for instance, in Seattle, they have found a loophole which says that if you are making a movie, which is then going to be streamed, then you get to jump the queue in a sense, and you can actually have people work. So they have opted to film a bunch of their projects, and they're releasing them to subscribers as films, which are not like necessarily movies, but they're filmic events, I would put it that way, of normal operas. The other big untapped thing, and it's starting to explode really, is people coming up with new work. And new work that is small, and new work that is not necessarily designed for Zoom, but that is designed to be to exploit new technologies so that it can be viewed digitally in a way that is satisfying. And
That's happening in the theater too.
yes, we need to just find some great composers to do that, and they're there.
And Emily, you said you thought that Broadway was going to come back sooner rather than later?
Well, I don't know what we call sooner and later in these weird days where we live through one blur's day after another. But Dr. Fauci just this morning or yesterday said he thought that there would be a way to get people back into theaters by the fall, mid to late fall, which makes me think more like early winter. And already people are, as Peter was saying, getting their work ready. In the theater, we have less money now. I think a lot of our audiences have less money and can't pay as much as they could. People are looking at how to do things that will cost less and be able to be done in a way that there can be some social distancing in the theaters. So even when we come back, I mean, we've gone through plagues before, the theaters. I mean, we look at, you know, Shakespeare went through 3 plagues, and he came back and had written some of his best work during that time. I think it was.
And that's what you're doing, right, Emily?
Yeah, right. If only I could write Lear, the Scottish play, and Antony and Cleopatra in this year and a half, right?
Well, we'll be ready when
But I
it's
think
done.
that's what we're going to be seeing. People are stored up with, the artists are, you know, as Jerome was saying, keeping their chops going somehow, any way they can. And a lot of writers are doing a lot of writing. But yes, I think we will come back. I think it'll be very different. And I also think the institutional theaters, as well as Broadway and the commercial theaters, are looking very carefully at the Black Lives Matter movement, how incredibly racist and sexist our particular industry is, has been, and many of us have been fighting it for a very long time and hoping that finally we're going to make more progress in this area so that when people come back, it's not just going to be the same old on stage. That's my
Charlotte,
hope.
I know you have something to bring to that, but I'd actually like, before you do, and we'll get back to you, to talk to Jerome, who, you know, is in a different kinds of venues, sometimes large venues, but sometimes very small ones. And what are you thinking it's going to look like for you? And I know that you've been doing marvelous concerts on the jamming on the streets of Brooklyn.
Well, I think that there are a lot of questions. There's a lot of head scratching going on. Um, in the short term, well, I'll give you an example. In the short term in New York City, there's work going on both by city government and many musicians trying to figure out what can be done to restart in-person performing outdoors when warm weather comes back. Personally, I really feel that New York City blew it in terms of trying to help get some sensible virus protocols and support for performers to take advantage of the last warm weather season. People were doing it in a guerrilla manner, including in my neighborhood, just literally around the corner from me, some colleagues set up a weekly outdoor jam session that was in conjunction with a expansion of New York City's Open Streets, Open Restaurants initiative. There's happened to be a number of bistros on this wide street, half a block from me, and restaurants, got set up. We're able to set up outdoor, expand their outdoor seating areas that through the city's Open Restaurants program, and so performers, including my neighbors, started doing this open jam session weekly. And we're currently trying to work with the local neighborhood development council that ran that initiative to make the thing more legal, you could say. And the city has passed a program. Actually, they're instituting a program called Open Culture, which has gotten a bit of press, to help venues have access to public space for putting on outdoor arts and culture events. And since outdoor events, it's easier to do the social distancing, and they're demonstrably safer than indoor events. So there's going to be a lot of that. How that affects, more formal work remains to be seen. Both in terms of how it affects the work content itself and the, trying to get it paid. How setting up things to actually have performers earn income in that way, in those sorts of venues. There's a lot of thinking and proposing and trying to come up with ways. We're very much in that period, trying to envision things for the spring, summer, and fall.
Well, hopefully by fall, things will begin to move back inside and you'll have your venues back, and that they won't have collapsed altogether.
We will see.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely.
And ventilation is going to be very important.
What?
Ventilation is going to be hugely
Ventilation, right,
important.
exactly,
And when you think
exactly,
about the old clubs, I mean, it's going to be quite a challenge.
right. Charlene, I know that you have some interesting
Oh,
things that Greensboro is doing in terms of new operas. Is that
oh,
something that?
yes, yeah, and I think I'm sort of cluing into what Jerome said about just trying to envision how we're going to go forward, and whether it's going to be outdoors or inside. And Emily's thing about it being smaller operas. I think Greensboro Opera has formed a feasibility committee to look into doing an opera on the Greensboro Four, which is the young students, the four young college students in 1960 who started the lunch counter sit-ins at the Woolworth building. And we're hoping to do that. We want to try and do things more with the community, and we're hoping we can do that with the International Center, Civil Rights Center and Museum, located in that original Woolworth building here in Greensboro. So we're really trying to work with local groups and organizations to address community, because we all want to see ourselves on stage. And then small, it doesn't have to be big opera, just small things.